this morning. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. I'm Senator Maddie Daughtry. I'm the Assistant Senate Majority Leader, and I represent Senate District 24, which is Bailey Island, Brunswick, Freeport, Harpswell, North Yarmouth, Orrs Island, Pownell, South Freeport, and South Harpswell. And I am pleased and honored to introduce LD 1559, resolved to create the commission to develop a paid family and medical leaves benefit program. Imagine you are sick and you really need to stay home, but you can't afford to lose a day of pay. So you drag yourself to work and make matters worse by prolonging your recovery and potentially infecting your coworkers. Imagine you're a child or an elderly parent is sick and you need to stay home to take care for them, but again, you cannot afford to miss a day's work. Or maybe it's a cheerful event, like the birth or adoption of a new child, and you must choose between bonding with the newborn or bringing home a paycheck. Giving up hours of work, let alone several days or weeks without pay, can look like giving up co-pays, a car payment, trips to the grocery store, or the inability to pay rent or heat. No one should be forced to choose between financial security and personal and family wellness. We need to find a way to best implement paid family medical leave to ensure Mainers aren't faced with these painful and burdensome decisions. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted deep inequities throughout our society and placed a heavy burden on essential workers and small businesses as they desperately try to stay afloat. Every single one of us has struggled with the balancing act that has become our lives over the last 14 months. Parents have had to juggle taking time off to help their children with remote learning when schools and daycares were shuttered. Businesses have lost vital employees who needed to take the time to be able to care for a loved one, a child, or themselves. And tragically, many Mainers who contracted this disease have had to deal with the ramifications, not only of this illness, but the lack of paid time off. COVID-19 has highlighted what we all know. PFML will be good for Maine, its businesses, its employees, and reduce financial insecurity. Paid family medical leave has been an issue near and dear to me since I was first elected, I can now say it, many years ago, and this is my fourth time presenting a bill in front of this committee for paid family medical leave. This year, I'm proposing a different path to move our state forward to this goal. LD 1559 would create a commission to study and propose a comprehensive paid family medical leave program for Maine. The commission will hear from workers, employers, caregivers, and experts, and will propose a system to support all workers, families, and employers in Maine. This commission would craft a system that best fits Maine's needs and demographics. The United States is one of the only developed countries in the world without paid family medical leave. While there are some proposals at the federal level to implement such a program, we all know how slow things move in Washington. We can't afford to wait for the federal government to act. We wouldn't be alone. Currently, California, Rhode Island, Washington, New Jersey, Connecticut, New York, the District of Columbia, and Massachusetts all have paid family medical leave programs, with Colorado in the process of enacting one. Maine could join other states in supporting working families and small businesses. So a little bit about paid leave. So it has benefits for employees. 85% of workers nationally must choose between taking care of their health or losing income. It improves the health of employees by enabling them to take the time they need to heal or bond, and it allows them to take time to seek preventative care. It also has benefits for employers. Paid leave increases worker productivity, and they tend to have fewer days away from work. It increases worker retention, with studies showing that it can reduce turnover by up to 50%. Enabling employees to stay home when sick reduces the amount of workplace contagion. And in 2018, 56.9% of Maine employees were employed by small businesses, and 99.3% of all Maine businesses are considered small, and many can't afford to offer their employees this type of benefit. A state-based program would help bridge this gap. Paid leave is also good for children and families. Paid family leave improves the well-being of newborns, children, and their parents, and increases childhood outcomes, especially during the critical development period. Whether after the birth or adoption of a child, those first days and weeks are critical. And the sad reality is that nearly 25% of women take 10 or fewer days of maternity leave, and most maternity benefits don't grant equal leave to fathers. Paid leave would be good for all Maine families, from traditional two-parent families, single-parent families, multi-generational ones, and especially LGBTQ families who were frequently left out of these policies. It's also good for the elderly. We all know, we say this a lot in this legislature, but Maine is the oldest state in the country, and our seniors have specific needs to remain productive and healthy. Over 80% of older adults have at least one chronic condition that requires care that often falls to relatives. Access to paid leave allows workers to take time to care for their loved ones. Family involvement reduces recovery time from health complications and decreases the need for expensive services such as hospital stays and nursing homes. This has also been made clear during the COVID-19 crisis that we need paid family medical leave. It helps patients stay afloat when they're sick or need to care for their loved ones. The financial insecurity created by COVID-19 is felt every day, and a paid family medical leave program will give Maine businesses the flexibility to care for their employees and keep their businesses afloat. COVID-19 has also placed an undue burden on women and people of color in the workforce. Women are 49% of the workforce and roughly 68% of frontline workers in our nation. And Black workers are 31% more likely to be frontline workers, and partially explains Maine's large racial disparity among COVID-19 patients. A PFML system would support our heroes on the front lines. So there is one amendment I would like to make to this bill right off the bat. If I can draw the committee's attention to Section 9 of the bill. Currently as drafted, the funds for the commission would come from transfers from the Department of Professional and Financial Regulation. Having worked with DPFR as a former chair of the IDEA Committee, I do not want to sweep those funds in order to fund this crucial work and have communicated this to Commissioner Head. With the influx of funds coming in from the federal government through the American Rescue Plan and other sources, I'd like to find a way to fund the commission through those avenues. As I said earlier, I've worked on this issue since I was first elected to the Maine legislature. When I first introduced this bill, and in subsequent years, I thought of family members who I helped care for during the end of their terminal illnesses. I thought of my own need for paid time after being hit by a car while bicycling. I thought of my parents and would I be able to have the means to be able to care for them when they are older. As a small business owner, I thought of my employees and how this is a benefit that I aspire to make a reality for them. There are a plethora of reasons that brought me to first start introducing PFML. Now sitting before you in my first term as a state senator and my 9th year in the Maine legislature, my commitment to making this program happen is even stronger. Right before the pandemic completely turned our world upside down, I have this vivid memory of walking to my business, Moderation Brewing. I had my headphones in, I was listening to the news, and there was a piece about paid family medical leave. They discussed the multitude of programs in other countries and the sheer lack of this policy in the US. There were stories of individuals with access to PFML through their businesses and how crucial it was for them. I'll never forget, I was getting to the back of the brewery, and one woman on the piece was discussing the vital role 12 paid weeks off from work gave her to care for and bond with her new infant. As my hand touched the door handle and I was opening the back door and looking in at our bustling tap room, I had this pang, this deep sadness and fear, as I realized that someone who is self-employed and hopes to be a mother, that this was an experience and a benefit that I might never see. I also knew that I was not alone in that moment, and that for most Mainers, we are all in the same boat. And as much as I think I could totally pull and rock, pulling beer drafts with a new infant strapped to my chest, I do hope that when that day comes, that I and all Mainers can access paid family medical leave. We need a system like this for Maine. We're in desperate need of it with our aging population and our need to be able to attract and retain young families. We need to support working families in Maine's economy. The COVID-19 crisis has highlighted what we've known for years. Paid family medical leave is necessary, important, and should be implemented by us in the state of Maine. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to try and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Senator Daughtry, for presenting this bill, for all of your hard work over your 5 terms in the legislature. I will now open up the public hearing for questions. Representative Cuddy has one.
Thank you, Senator Hickman. Thank you, Senator. I keep on calling you Representative Daughtry, but I'm learning, Senator Daughtry, for your testimony today and for presenting this legislation. You mentioned you were considering changing the funding model. Do you have an amendment you're going to propose perhaps later, or are you waiting to see what shakes out with the APR funding?
I'd say it's a little bit of both. I'm in conversations, with the different departments and trying to find, best avenue, and obviously, wanting to have those conversations with appropriations. So it is something that I'd like to work on and try to come up with some amended language for the work session, but also recognize that we are still all in the process with all of our bills of figuring out how to allocate the different funding we have coming in.
Thank you.
Chairman Sylvester.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Daughtry, for bringing this bill forward and all your work on it. I think that one of the pieces that gets missed often as we talk about workers are small business folks like yourself and myself and most businesses in Maine, that the small business folks are also a part of this system. So it's not just the workers, but also the owners. And I wonder, it would cover all Mainers, wouldn't it? Farmers and self-employed, gig employed.
That's my goal. I think that's really what I think the strength of having a commission. And instead of taking a policy from somewhere else, we know in Maine, we are different. We need to find solutions that fit us with our demographics, with our rural nature, and also with our high amount of small businesses, as you mentioned. The idea is being able to be careful and deliberative to ensure that the policy we develop is able to cover exactly the workers you mentioned. Because, the majority of us are self-employed. I know I'm really proud of my lead co-sponsor who has her own experience of being self-employed as well, what that toll can take, and recognize that we need to find a solution that, brings everyone in, whether it's folks who are, frontline workers, gig workers, as you mentioned, and also recognizing that there's some pretty big disparities in who has access nationwide to paid family medical leave. It's not just small business. If you look overwhelmingly, women don't have access to this, especially women of color. So the idea is be able to, look at all the different plans, look at Maine and find something that works for us and make a Maine-based solution.
Quick follow-up, Mr. Chair.
You may proceed.
Senator, you mentioned COVID. I spent the entire first part of this thinking about what it would have meant had we been able to get this bill through in the 129th, and we're able to put this together last Saturday. What do you think this would have meant to the average Mainer if we had had a family medical leave in place when COVID hit?
I think it would have been a complete and utter game changer. I know all of us around the Zoom squares have our own experience of trying to balance our lives, whether it's our life as a legislator and trying to balance our remote work, as well as the remote work of other family members or children doing remote school. But if you think back to when we first, adjourned in the 129th and all the stories that I know I was hearing from my district of folks having to make, those tough decisions of one child's at home, do they have both parents stay in? Could they afford to take the time to deal with the children? Or, I urge you all to read all of the written testimony. There's some particularly heart-wrenching stories of folks who did contract COVID-19, not only lost their jobs, are suffering with the long-term effects of this deadly disease, but also are facing financial ruin because of the sheer amount of medical bills as well as no income coming in. So if we'd had this in place, think about, what wouldn't have been an easy transition, but it definitely would have eased the chaos and the financial insecurity and just the general fear we all had in that moment. If you knew when, schools shut down that you could take, a little bit of time to be able to, get your feet on the ground and figure out how your family's going to work, or if you weren't scared of, seeking medical attention, it would have really changed things. So I think I keep reminding myself there's many different policies, but especially I think on paid family medical leave, COVID-19 has made it clear we can't wait on something like this. We need to take care of Mainers.
Representative Drinkwater has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator. It's good to see you 2 days in a row.
Good to see you too.
You've hit all the right talking points here about our kids. That's a very emotional issue. Parents that are sick. As you know, we heard a lot of gut-wrenching same stories yesterday also. My question to you is you've said that you've introduced this in the past. What has prevented this from going forward?
So this is an excellent question, and thank you, Representative Drinkwater. So one of the things is just figuring out the actuarial cost of this program. So my other proposals were drafting up actual programs that could be implemented if the bill was passed into law. And there were some issues of, sort of taking that, model piece and trying to apply it to Maine. We have a high amount of small businesses. We need to find a way to make sure that it's not providing an added burden on our employers and is also available to self-employed individuals. We also have an aging population. So I think this is one of these examples where we really need to find a Maine-based solution. Having served on the education committee, how much we love those conversations where we really drill down. And I think of the work I've done on student debt, where we were able to have a commission and spend some significant time looking at what student debt meant for Maine. And it was, outside of our normal session with experts and students and policymakers. And it enabled those conversations to find what our actual unmet need was for student debt. And that was one of the most transformative experiences I've had as a policymaker. I think that's exactly what this program needs. Some of the barriers of being able to implement it before will be solved by figuring out what works for Mainers. And I really love the way it's written for the different, the diversity of groups that would be able to come before this commission. And I think the challenge before all of us is to really think about, how does this work? How can we, find the best solution that fits Maine?
Thank you, Senator, and we'll probably see you next week.
Absolutely.
Representative Gear has a question. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and great to see you, Senator Daughtry. My question has to do with economic development, and in our committee, we've heard a lot about, for example, the barrier that our housing crisis is to businesses being able to hire and bring in people to work in their companies. And as a small business owner, along with you, I'm just wondering how much we think this could be a differentiator for Maine. We already are a place that attracts a lot of entrepreneurial energy and people who are creative and want to start businesses. I'm curious as to your thinking on that.
I think it would be a complete and utter game changer, not only as a small business employer myself, but having actually talked to a couple of my brewing colleagues last night and was telling them, what bill I was presenting today. Most of us who are, looking at, 5, 10 employees would love to be able to offer this type of program, but especially when you're getting started, when you're, in an entrepreneurial spirit, you might not be able to have the bandwidth to be able to offer this. And if you could be competing along with other, larger businesses to offer this as part of a larger benefit package and be able to draw it down from the state, it's going to help you be able to recruit different employees that you might not have been able to access before. And also by making it, a state-based program with all of us together, it's not putting the same amount of pressure on the employer. If we're working, to find a solution that, covers everyone, it really could be a huge game changer. I mean, I was talking to a small business here locally that was, hoping to figure out how to be able to provide this for 2 employees and was calculating it was going to take them about 10 years to be able to get the infrastructure in for this. So I think it'd be a complete and utter game changer. And especially as we're looking at attracting young families. And I know there's some testimony coming after me about exactly that.
Thank you.
Of course.
Are there any other questions from the committee for the bill sponsor? Seeing none, thank you very much, Senator Daughtry. I will now take testimony from co-sponsors on the bill, beginning with the lead co-sponsor in the House, Representative McDonald, followed by Senator Vitelli, Representative Cloutier, Representative Millett, and Representative Rayner. Welcome, Representative McDonald. The floor is yours.
Good morning. Nice to see everyone. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. I am Representative Genevieve McDonald of House District 134, and I'm testifying before you today as a co-sponsor in favor of LD 1559, resolve to create the commission to develop a paid family and medical leave benefits program. They say you're never fully prepared to welcome a child into the world. I know this to be true because I have tried. When my husband and I found out we were expecting, we were overjoyed. In preparation, we went to the best doctors, painted the nursery, read all the books, and set aside my husband's 2-week paid vacation, thinking we would spend that time together bonding as a new family. We were ready until I went into labor 6 weeks early. In April of 2018, we welcomed our 2 beautiful daughters into the world. Upon their arrival, they were admitted to the neonatal intensive care unit, and our vision of being discharged as a family was shattered and replaced by the countless hours spent sitting by their incubators, listening to the sound of heart monitors. We were fortunate our children were never critical, but they needed to reach developmental milestones before they could be discharged. As the days dragged on, we began to worry about what we would do when my husband's vacation time ran out. Due to the high-risk nature of my pregnancy, I had been out of work for some time, and because I was self-employed, did not have a safety net in the form of paid leave. With the addition of the travel expenses we were incurring to be with our children at the NICU, we could not afford for him to take unpaid time off. Our children were discharged on a Saturday, just in time for my husband to return to work before his vacation time ran out. Monday morning found me alone at home as a new mom, still recovering from a C-section with 2 medically vulnerable infants. I still lament the loss of our opportunity to spend that time at home together, bonding with our children, welcoming visitors, and basking in the joy of new parenthood. If we'd had more than 2 weeks, we could have recaptured some of that experience. We won't get that time back, but other families still can. LD 1559 would find a path forward to help families like mine be better prepared. The chance to bond with your children, care for a family member, or recover from an illness without the added stress of looming financial responsibilities is invaluable for everyone involved. Paid family and medical leave would allow parents facing medical uncertainties to concentrate on caring for their children without having to worry about how they're going to pay their bills. The ripple effect would be far-reaching, with more people staying in their jobs, fewer families on the brink of bankruptcy, and employers finding they have a happier and more productive workforce. Workers shouldn't be punished for getting sick, having children, or helping to care for a loved one. If we, the legislature, do this for Maine families, we can alter our trajectory for the better. I want Maine to be a state where work pays, both in terms and salaries and quality of life. And while it isn't part of my testimony, I'd like to share my experience with COVID and how paid family and medical leave would have helped people. I don't think many people realize that if you contracted COVID and you were too sick to work, you were no longer eligible for unemployment, because unemployment was not a replacement for paid family and medical leave. So when businesses were shuttered, businesses were closed, people were out of work, people were faced with tremendous uncertainty. If they actually got sick, there was nothing there to support them. I had a constituent whose business had been closed and who had a heart attack while collecting unemployment and was no longer eligible. So having this safety net in place through COVID would have been extremely beneficial to Maine families. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative. Chairman Sylvester has a question for you.
Thank you. Representative McDonald, thank you for your testimony. You and I spent a long time talking about the unemployment system about a year ago. And this is also a wage replacement system. And I wonder about your thoughts for your constituents, had they been able to move to utilize this wage replacement instead of having to wait weeks or months for unemployment, how that might have affected small business folks, lobstermen, all of those folks in your district.
It absolutely would have provided necessary support. I mean, I spoke with numerous people and had to explain to them how to fill out the application because they had COVID. And so there was a question, are you able and available to work? And it was like, well, I'm able, but I'm contagious. And it was very strange the way the system was set up, that although you couldn't go to work, you were able to work. So you qualified for unemployment. But then in any case where somebody was hospitalized or actually ill, they weren't able to collect unemployment. And I had to explain to those people that, yes, this program, unemployment, pandemic unemployment assistance was created for COVID, but actually does not cover if you get sick from COVID.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the good representative from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Representative Gear has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative McDonald, for your testimony. One of the things you said just really struck me, and I guess I'm just looking for your further reflection on it, that people should not be punished for having children. And we've had different bills that we've heard testimony on in this committee where I just think about that statement, and I think about the events that we all have in our lives as human beings, whether it's a joyful event like a birth, or a difficult event like the sickness of an elderly relative in a long decline. And I guess I'm just looking to hear more of your thoughts on that, because it just seems such a backward thing. We've got, we need population in Maine, we need young people and young families. And at the same time, we have no way to support folks when they are, when they do have a new child. So curious as to your thoughts.
Sure, absolutely. And I'll be very blunt. I mean, I think that, I did everything right. I got married. I had a great job. I went to college, and then I decided that I was in a, financially stable and, relationship stable place to have children. And I was very excited to take that next step. I didn't expect to have twins. I'm a commercial fisherman, so certainly that became an issue. There was a weight limit to what I could lift. And so I was out of work for quite a while. And then with the addition of the time in the NICU, I came very close to losing my business. I had a lot of difficulty keeping up with boat payments. And then, we pulled through, but certainly paid family and medical leave would have made that transition to, just moving forward with their life in a very, typical way for Maine families to do. Having a child is very exciting, but sometimes there's just uncertainties that you don't plan for.
Are there any other questions for Representative McDonald? Chairman Sylvester.
I'm sorry, I come back in, committee members, but I was struck when I went to a conference on this in Washington we heard from a young farmer who was explaining that her and her husband could only afford one other person in the barn with them, and that having a wage replacement program like this allowed her to consider and be able to have a baby because it gave them the financial security to be able to hire someone to take her spot in the barn. And as you were talking about your business, I just wonder what it does for young women who want to start a business, who want to be entrepreneurs, who want to run their own, endeavors. What do you think it means to them to be able to have this sort of wage replacement? Never mind justice, never mind any of those things, right? Just the ability to cover that little bit of finance in the time that you need it, whatever that need is.
I mean, I think it would be life-changing. It would certainly allow people to pursue growing their families sooner. I mean, I waited deliberately as long as I did. I was 36 when my kids were born, and then I tried to time it around my fishing season. And you wouldn't have to try, and nothing ever works out perfectly, right? So it's all idyllic in your head. But when we delayed having a family for quite a long time to make sure that I would be able to carry on my business, and then we still almost couldn't. So it would certainly allow, young families, particularly young women, to be able to pursue growing their families sooner, and maybe not be faced with some of the same medical uncertainties I faced due to my maternal age, quite frankly.
Thank you, Representative.
Are there any other questions for Representative McDonald from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Now, while we do normally allow for co-sponsors and lawmakers to testify first, we have a special request from a constituent of Senator Daughtry who would like to testify before 10 a.m. in order to get to the press conference on this bill in time. Does anyone object to that? Seeing no objection, I will promote Ms. Erica Carly Harris to be a panelist and to provide her testimony so that her day won't get screwed up. Welcome.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much, and thank you for your flexibility. I really appreciate that. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and members of the committee, my name is Erica Carly Harris. I live in Brunswick, and I'm asking you today to support LD 1559. The last time I testified in front of this committee in support of a paid leave bill, I was 7 months pregnant with my son, Albion. It's very hot in the committee room, so I'm actually really enjoying the Zoom format today. I spoke about how differently I was approaching my planned leave then, the second time around, since my employer had implemented a much more generous paid leave policy than when I gave birth to my daughter in 2016. Just a few months later, I gave birth to my son and suffered a rare and life-threatening complication that led to emergency surgery an hour after my son was placed in my arms. I lost over 1 liter of blood, which led to a level of exhaustion combined with the struggles of newborn care and PTSD from the birth that left me unable to do much of anything other than lie on my couch and attempt to breastfeed. I tried and failed to walk around my block a week after Albie's birth. My midwives told me to expect 6 to 8 weeks to feel relatively normal And in my case, it was closer to 10 before I was able to get back to a regular activity level. It is unconscionable that birthing parents in a similar condition are forced back into the workforce days, not weeks after giving birth. I have a desk job, but I worked as a restaurant server for many years in my teens and 20s. I imagine that if I had been expected to carry a heavy tray of drinks 2 weeks after Albie's birth, I would have passed out. It would have put me at real medical situation. I didn't have to do that. I was fortunate enough to have access to paid leave. And by the time I went back to work, I felt ready, even excited, I would say, and more importantly, supported. For too many new parents, it is a question of physical and mental health versus financial necessity. LB 1559 will assess the situation for families like mine, and I hope set the stage to put in place a comprehensive paid leave bill that will go a long way towards protecting vulnerable Mainers during a critical time. I ask all of you to support LB 1559. I thank you, and I also just want to thank Senator Daughtry, who's been such a leader on this issue, and I'm so proud to call you my senator.
Thank you, Ms. Carly Harris. Are there any questions from the committee? Safe travels. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much.
We'll now return to co-sponsored testimony, beginning with Senator Eloise Vitelli, the Majority Leader in the Senate. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and esteemed members of the Labor and Housing Committee. Good to be back with you here again today. My name is Eloise Vitelli, and I represent Senate District 23, which is all of Saginaw County and the town of Dresden in Lincoln County. And I'm very pleased to be here today to speak in support of this bill. You will hear, as you just did, from many individuals who have been directly affected by the lack of such a policy in this state. So let me just summarize some of my remarks in my written testimony. It's clear that we have an opportunity today, as we move out of this pandemic, to look closely at what is working and not working in our society and in our economy to support our state's people and our state's economy. We all know that this pandemic has exposed serious flaws in many of the systems that are supposed to support people through these difficult times. It includes our healthcare system, unemployment, which you've heard a lot about in this committee in particular, and also other ways of supporting our working families. By way of background, some of you may not be aware, I spent almost 40 years in my career working at what is currently called the New Ventures Maine program. It was started out as a displaced homemakers program, which was designed and is still doing its work today to help people transition into the workforce and to find a way to support themselves and their family through jobs that pay good wages, small businesses that can support themselves and build wealth in their communities. So I'm very familiar with the struggles that individuals have paid over the years in trying to find their way into the workforce in a successful, forward-looking fashion. What is still true today, and it's remarkable in many ways, is that the caretaking responsibilities disproportionately continue to fall on women in our society. A displaced homemaker, just as another aside, was defined as a person whose primary responsibilities had been to take care of things in the home while being supported by their spouse, but who had lost their means of support and so had to go into the labor force in order to earn an income and support their family. That was a tough transition, but women have been moving into the labor force in greater numbers for many years. And it was concerning to me and many of us to see that during this pandemic, women tended to lose their jobs and to be the ones to stay at home to take care of their children who were now no longer going off to school or who'd lost their childcare, and numbers far exceeding those of their male counterparts. And so again, while whole family units have been disrupted by this pandemic, it has been the women in the families that have been most particularly hurt by this process. So anything we can do to support our workforce is going to be critical as we seek to recover from this pandemic. It's already been said that we need to attract younger workers into our state because we are an aging state. And putting such a policy as paid family medical leave in place could serve as a real attraction to new workers into the state. And I think that's certainly true, in addition to just supporting the people that we already have here who want to work and whose lives have been disrupted by the pandemic and all of its implications. So just to summarize, while the family medical leave at the federal level is certainly better than nothing, it doesn't do nearly enough to support Maine families. And so we know in looking at other states and other countries that it is possible to put something in place that better supports our working families through a paid family medical leave policy. And it is time that we do the hard work. As the sponsor of this bill, my colleague, Senator Daughtry, has said, to really look at what can work here in Maine under our particular circumstances to make sure that we have in place the kinds of supports that can enable people to both work and support their families and not have to make these wrenching trade-offs during life's events without the kind of support that's needed. So thank you to Senator Daughtry for bringing this bill forward once again. And thank you for this committee for hearing this. You're going to hear some important information as this hearing goes forward. And I look forward to your good work in moving Maine forward towards a fair paid family medical leave policy. Thank you. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator Vitale, for your testimony this morning. Are there any questions from the committee for the Senate Majority Leader? Seeing none. I now open the floor for Representative Cloutier to provide her testimony. And let's see where we are. Welcome, Representative.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, friends. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and distinguished members of the Committee on Labor and Housing. As you know, I am Kristen Cloutier, and I proudly represent House District 60, part of my hometown of Lewiston in the Maine State Legislature. I also served as a primary caregiver for over a year as the daughter of someone diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And I am here today to testify in support of LD 1559, resolved to create the commission to develop a paid family and medical leave benefits program. And the story that I'm about to share with you is a deeply personal one, so I'm going to try to get through it, but you'll have to forgive me if I don't make it. In 2012, my mother was living alone in Ocala, Florida, and her family was here in Maine. And we visited with each other at least twice a year, her coming to Maine for Christmas and her children traveling to Florida to celebrate the arrival of spring. While things with my mother began to appear off over the course of some of those visits, it never occurred to any of her 3 children that she could have Alzheimer's. She was only entering her early 70s and had spent her entire life in great health. It wasn't long after her initial diagnosis from her primary care physician that we had moved her back to Maine and set her up with the memory care team at St. Mary's Regional Medical Center. Over the course of the next 6 years, the disease progressed quickly and aggressively, stripping away the parts of my mother that made her who she was. And she passed away on April 20th of 2018. When she first arrived in Maine, while we were fortunate to have access to excellent medical care, we did not have access to living conditions that fit my mother's stage of the disease. Because she was considered to have moderate Alzheimer's, it was difficult to find a place for her. She did not require the level of care that was available through the locked memory care facilities close to our home, yet she did require someone to be with her 24 hours a day. And this care ended up falling to my husband and me, who both needed to also work full-time to keep our household and family afloat financially. Mom went to adult daycare in Topsom while we were at work, and we split the duties of taking care of her in the evenings and on the weekends, juggling our schedules to manage a 10-year-old daughter at the time, 2 dogs, and our community responsibilities as well. I was blessed to have had this time with my mother, and I would not change our decision to take her into our home. I only wish that we had been able to take some time away from our jobs to do it. I have no doubt that our time together would have been less stressful and more meaningful for all of us. Eventually, as my mother moved into the final stages of the disease and our own self-care and relationships began to suffer, we were forced to place my mother into a facility. And it was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, and I will probably second guess it for the rest of my life because I know that her happiness and in turn her health declined from that point on. LD 1559 will create a commission to develop a paid family and medical leave benefits program. Such a program would have made it possible for both my husband and I, and so many others within this state, to take leave without having to choose between providing for our family or their families and taking time away from our jobs to care for my mother. We grieved the 3-year anniversary of my mother's passing just last month, and I am honoring her memory by sharing this story with you all today. And I hope that you will also honor her memory by supporting LD 1559 and by giving families like ours an opportunity to focus on the things that truly matter in life without the worry of how they will also make ends meet. So I thank you for your time and for allowing me to share that story with you. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Representative Clear. I almost couldn't get through your story, so I appreciate you for sharing it. My father had Alzheimer's. He ultimately passed away from cancer, but my mother, on the other hand, had progressive dementia, and she died from that. And the decision to put her in a facility is nothing like anything I thought I'd ever have to experience. So I appreciate and have compassion for what you've had to go through and for honoring your mother here today. So I thank you for that. Does the committee have any questions for Representative Cloutier? Seeing none, thank you again for being here. Next up, we have Representative Millett.
Good morning. My computer went to sleep. I'm so sorry. Good morning, everyone. I did not make it through without some tears, unfortunately, here. All right. Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and esteemed members of the Committee on Labor and Housing. I am Representative Rebecca Millett, and I represent House District 30, which is most of Cape Elizabeth. I am here in support of LD 1559, the resolve to create the commission to develop a paid family and medical leave benefits program. It is inevitable that almost everyone will have to take time away from work to care for a child, a family member who is sick, or to recover from a personal illness. Unlike nearly all other industrialized nations, the United States does not have national standards on paid family or sick leave, despite strong public support. Workplace benefits are an extremely important part of balancing work, family, and medical needs. And yet only 15% of American workers have access to any sort of paid leave. For 198,000 Mainers, staying home to care for oneself or a loved one means losing out on pay. And this is unacceptable. We must do more to ensure that no Mainer has to choose between their health and their economic security. I understand this committee has considered several pieces of legislation this session that aim to address our growing workforce shortage. Maine will continue to compete with every other state to attract qualified workers and retain the workers who already live here, unless we implement policies that make us more desirable. Fostering a supportive work environment would go a long way in incentivizing young people to relocate or choose to stay here. And this in turn supports our small businesses by reducing turnover costs and retaining their employees when they have to take time away. For example, new mothers who have access to paid leave are more likely to be back at work within 9 to 12 months than those who do not. Finally, this bill creates a commission that would invite critical voices to the table, including working Mainers, businesses, experts, and caregivers, ensuring no one is left out. This legislation is an opportunity for collaboration and would provide the Maine government with a broad understanding of the real and direct impacts a paid family and medical leave policy would have. As lawmakers, it is our duty to help improve the lives of our fellow Mainers. If we truly care about our workers, our families, and our seniors, our policies ought to reflect that. A statewide paid leave policy would help grow our workforce, keep our families and communities healthy, and benefit our businesses and economy. It's what we owe our workers. They've earned it. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative Millett. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, our committee clerk has informed us we are now streaming live on YouTube, which means we are also being recorded. I will now turn to our own Representative Rader to provide her testimony as a co-sponsor for LD 1559.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and fellow members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Amy Rader, and I represent House District 125, which includes part of Bangor. I'm here today in support of LD 1559, resolved to create the commission to develop a paid family and medical leave benefits program. I apologize, I'm a little bit nervous about this. I know I'm an actor, but sometimes that still happens. In the summer of 2016, my husband and I became resource parents. The same day that we received our foster parent license, we got a call informing us that there were 2 boys awaiting placement and we would be meeting them the next week. The day of their visit, I snuck out of my office, afraid to tell anyone where I was going and why. The visit went well and the boys were placed with us a few days later. At the time, my husband worked for a company that granted him 2 weeks of paid leave and an additional 6 weeks of unpaid leave for the placement of a foster child. Had he been a birth parent, he would have received 12 paid weeks. I was earning significantly less than he was then at a job that didn't provide official paid time off for family or medical leave. His leave was the only paid leave support we were guaranteed, and even still, it was not nearly enough. During this time, I didn't take more time off because I was afraid of losing my job. I later learned that was not an unfounded fear when my supervisor asked me if I thought I could still do my job now that I was a mother. This came after years of me putting in unpaid overtime. My boys came to us with significant trauma-related challenges. Most of us don't know what it's like to be sent to live with strangers, carrying all of our belongings in trash bags, only to repeat the cycle every couple of months or years. I hate that the reason I couldn't spend more time helping them acclimate to their new home was because we couldn't afford it. Yes, I am now the mom who once walked backwards to the bus stop holding a plate of scrambled eggs so my youngest could eat a hot breakfast while he was walking, but I lost so many of those early moments and I will never get them back. I'm not using hyperbole when I tell you that I would give anything to have had just a few more days with them when they first arrived. My sons are my whole heart, and I can't help but feel that I failed them in those first few weeks. And there's also the 3 weeks of unpaid or partially paid time that I took off to be with my father as he died from mesothelioma. I spent late nights in the hospital working as long as I could on my laptop on the hospital Wi-Fi while my dad slept, because even those few dollars made a big difference. And then 2 short years later, the cycle repeated itself when I had to take care of my mother as she died of pancreatic cancer. All unpaid, all because I had to be there. There was not a system of paid leave available to me when I needed it, and my husband's paid leave option was significantly less than ideal. Had it been available, I might still be working for that same employer today. We cannot continue to expect our constituents to forego their familial responsibilities. The choice between taking care of ourselves and our family members and a guaranteed paycheck is cruel and nonsensical. Thank you so much, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative, for your testimony and your vulnerability. Are there any questions from the committee for our colleague? Seeing none, we will now take testimony from the general public. Chairman Sylvester, will you please provide instructions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We allow 3 minutes for the general public. And so at the beginning of your testimony, I will hold up my phone to show you that the time is running and what that would look like. And if you would put your view into gallery, you will not only be able to see the smiling faces of my colleagues, but you'll also be able to see the phone when I hold it up at 30 seconds so that you can time yourself and end on time. I will gently nudge you if we get to the end of the time and you are still speaking.
And we will have people promoted in groups of 2 or 3. Please leave your videos on off until you are called to provide your testimony. So with that, Ms. Breton, could you please promote Mr. Adam Good, Ms. Autumn Main, Ms. Desti Holman-Sprague. We are going to take testimony in favor of the bill. There are several people signed up, and then there is testimony neither for nor against the bill to follow. So with that, I welcome Adam Good to provide his testimony.
I do not see Mr. Good in the attendee list.
Thank you. We will move then to Ms. Autumn Main. You are on mute.
That would help. Thank you.
Good morning.
Hello, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and distinguished members of the Joint Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Autumn Main, and I am an Air Force veteran. I work as a community organizer for Mainers for Working Families, and my focus is on listening to and learning from veterans and their families, ensuring that the voice of the veteran is heard. I'm reading this testimony on behalf of Tom Mock. He's also a veteran who was referred to me for assistance with an emergency housing need a couple of months ago. So this is from Tom. My name is Tom Mock. I am a Vietnam-era Air Force veteran and a survivor of COVID-19 from Topsom, Maine. I'm here today in support of LD 1559, resolved to create a commission to develop a paid and family medical leave benefits program. In mid-November, I contracted a severe case of COVID-19. I knew my odds of survival were tenuous at best, with many underlying conditions. I was as ill as I have ever been, and I honestly thought I might not survive. My doctor told me to shave my beard in order to be ready for intubation. Yet, miraculously, here I am, alive and having avoided hospitalization. However, I am plagued by long-term residual COVID symptoms. These symptoms aren't the only long-term effects of my illness. When I contracted COVID-19, I also lost my job of more than 8 years because the company I worked for had no earned sick time and no medical leave available to me when I got sick. After I left, I also discovered that I did not qualify for unemployment benefits and soon ran out of funds to pay my bills. I fell behind in my payments, and I'm worried honestly that I may soon lose my housing. I thought that my Vietnam-era military service would be the toughest challenge I would ever have to face. If someone had told me that when I reached 72 years of age, I would be in this situation, I would not have believed it. Yet here I am, seriously pondering an uncertain future, fearful and depressed. I wholeheartedly support paid family and medical leave. Had that been available to me when I contracted COVID, I feel certain I would not be in such dire straits now. Maine's legislators have an opportunity to study the best ways to implement such a system here by passing LD 1559. My message to you today is to take care of the good people of Maine and ensure that we can come out of this pandemic with a stronger support system in place. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your service. Are there any questions for Ms. Autumn Main from the committee? Seeing none. Next up, we have Dusty Holman Sprague, and Ms. Payton, if you could please promote Mr. Jeff McCabe, Mr. Jeffrey Young to follow. Welcome, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Dusty Holman Sprague. I join you here today on behalf of the Maine Women's Lobby. For over 40 years, we've advocated for public policy that increases the health, wellness, safety, and economic security of Maine women and girls. We are delighted today to support LD 1559 and thank Senator Daughtry and the many co-sponsors who shared their moving personal stories, and members of the committee who shared theirs. That's one of the things that I find so powerful about this issue. Almost everyone I've ever met or spoken with has a story about the need to care for themselves and their families. I want to draw your attention to an article from the Portland Press Herald that was titled "Maine Women Hit Hardest by Unemployment" in May of 2020. And 1 year later, last month, we have another article stating crisis far from over for Maine women suffering prolonged unemployment. In the last 14 months, the pandemic has resulted in generation-defining job losses among women in Maine, and this is overwhelmingly because of the fact that women are more likely to leave the job force due to essential caregiving responsibilities. I think most of us in this space understand exactly what that has meant for families and for Maine in the last year. There are a number of other folks who have already drawn your attention to some of these, the gender impacts. A couple of things that I want to just highlight, in addition, that they're in my written testimony, but I do want to highlight the fact that this disproportionately impacts low-wage earning women, especially Black, Brown, and Indigenous women, who are more often employed in service sector and hospitality jobs, which are deemed essential, but are far less likely to have access to paid family and medical leave, or any paid leave or family-friendly work schedules. I also want to highlight a story that I thought of this morning, or a realization I had this morning, which is not in my testimony, but that I think is the kind of intersection we won't always be thinking of here. I spent many years sitting on the statewide homicide review panel in my role at the Coalition Against Sexual Assault. And I saw again and again that there were times when children and families were experiencing real harm, trauma, and violence, in part because of the impossible choices they had to make. I remember a case of a young mom just after birth having to walk to her service sector job, leaving her baby in the hands of her teenage boyfriend. And, it was the homicide review panel. So I think you know where that story went. We know that this happens again and again. This is our opportunity here in Maine to use, frankly, federal stimulus funds and a range of other resources to develop a statewide approach that is centered in our state agency and our state needs. I hope that you will vote ought to pass on this bill, and I appreciate your time this morning. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony, perfectly timed. Are there any questions from the committee? Representative Gear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for being here, Ms. Holman Sprague. I really wanted to respond to that last thing you said about the increase in pressure on families under these periods of stress. And specifically, just really wanting you to maybe speak a little bit more about that, because I think there tends to be a belief that when we increase pressure on people around employment issues, we will incentivize behavior that brings them into the workforce in a certain way. And you're calling out a different scenario there, where that actually has outcomes that are pretty antithetical to, I believe, what anyone would want. And I would just be curious as to your perspective on that.
My experience, both as a Mainer, right, like as a human being, I remember the experience of going back to work at 8 weeks because I didn't have leave. And then when the childcare fell through, my partner quit work after the first week and never went back. So that's, and we didn't even have stress and trauma and violence in our family. We just had the stress of trying to figure out how to make it work. And the result was that it pushed my partner out of the workforce for 10 years. My work in sexual assault and trauma showed that really when people don't have the resources and infrastructure to manage the stressors in their lives, that sometimes going to work is the thing that has to get pushed out, or that they face the kinds of choices of trying to figure out how to manage infant care and child care and family care in ways that have really devastating results.
Chairman Sylvester has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you're looking through the bill, one of the things that strikes me is that similar to Washington, where a coalition was brought together to put together the fundamentals of the bill, this has a similar pattern of bringing together a commission. But different than a lot of the commissions you see, this looks like a lot of regular folks getting together to talk about this. So actual employers and experts and folks rather than representatives of groups. And I'm wondering why you think that might be important in the makeup of this bill.
I think that, we've tried, and as Senator Daughtry spoke to so eloquently, we've been trying to come at this issue for years and years. And I feel more hopeful now than I ever have before. And in part, it is because of the inclusion of lots of different stakeholders in the process, not only people who are representing organizations, but people who actually have the lived experience. For example, someone who owns or works in a small business or a large business, rather than sort of an organizational perspective. We want to have the voices of people who are on the ground, sharing their lived experience, sharing the expertise of actually trying to grapple with these issues, as well as people who are from state agencies who can talk about what the resources and needs are within the state infrastructure and bring those two experiences together to develop the best plan for Maine.
Are there any other questions from the committee?
May I have a quick follow-up, Mr. Chair?
You may.
I'm curious, is one of the things that this commission will be looking at is how to educate Maine people about the program and to seek input from regular Maine people who aren't on the commission about how it should be structured?
I think I see two places of intersection there in terms of the connection with the public. The first is that the bill does require that the commission take input from the public at large. That is in part, again, because of how we know how essential it is that we hear really from people who are working and giving care and in recovery in their communities. So there is that requirement that they do the job of hearing that input. But I think that you've raised a really important example or a really important point about the need to think about the implementation of this program, not only as like a new type of wage replacement, but also how we help people understand how the system works, whether they're eligible, how they access it. You can't just build a program and like launch it into the sky like a balloon. You really need to do the work to implement it. And I think that's part of what this commission can do, to think about the long-term building, implementation, and then making sure people actually understand how they can access the program. We saw over the last year that access was one of the major barriers to unemployment insurance. I expect that that would be true for a program like this if we don't take the time to educate folks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Chair Sylvester, Chair Hickman, members of the Labor and Housing Committee. My name is Jeff McCabe. I serve as the Legislative and Political Director for Maine Service Employees Association. We are a labor union representing over 13,000 members here in the state of Maine. We are here today in strong support of LD 1559. And right out of the gate, we want to thank the sponsors, and we also want to thank Chair Sylvester for his work on this issue for continuing to be a leader, and also for all his efforts in educating himself on models that exist around the state, and for his work that got us here today. So the sort of only recommendation or suggestion that I have right out of the gate in regards to the actual commission is under Section A in the consideration of the membership. And this may be something that could be achieved just by us bringing it up or unallocated language, but the section around a representative from independent contractor or with labor experience, we might expand that out to just reference sort of experience and understanding of collective bargaining agreements. With that being said, it's not something necessarily that we feel needs to be changed in the actual language, but sort of just talking about it and maybe making that recommendation for whoever might be doing the appointments in the final bill. But we just wanted to raise that. And I think it's important that people share stories. And folks might not know, but if I was going to back up 21 years ago when I graduated college, my trajectory was such that I really wanted to work in the recreational industry here in Maine. It's something that I've dabbled in, I've been part of for the last 21 years. But at the same time, 15 years ago is when the birth of my first child occurred. And it's probably one of the greatest joys of my life. It is at times been one of my biggest challenges, but I just needed to share that story with you all and to think back to that experience. I was working at that time 2 to 3 jobs in any given year. And when my daughter was born, I found myself with a 10-day-old baby that I became responsible for taking care of. It was a situation I had not planned on. Her mother ended up being hospitalized for a period of time, and I was not ready for that. I worked for a small nonprofit here in the state. That was sort of my main income at the time, and I had a choice to make. I had a choice to make to not go back to work, to go AWOL, because I only had 1 or 2 weeks of vacation time. So that is something that has sort of set me on the trajectory that I've been on. It's something that as I prepare for the birth of my 3rd child, I find myself personally in a very different situation. And that is not lost on me. The privilege that I have and the job that I have allows me to be home, both with my wife and this newborn child that should arrive sometime in June. And that is something that it really weighs heavy on me today. And I thought it was important that I share that story with you all. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. McCabe. Are there any questions? Seeing none. Next, we will hear from Jeffrey Young and followed by Joy Engel, Julie Shermer, Kara Kakini.
Good morning, members of the committee, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and other distinguished members. My name is Jeffrey Neal Young. I'm an attorney with Solidarity Law, and I'm testifying here this morning on behalf of the Maine Employment Lawyers Association. MELA is the largest organization of civil rights lawyers here in the state. We have about 75 member attorneys who represent employees in labor and employment matters across the state. I want to say as a member of MELA that will obviously strongly endorse this bill, but I want to say as the lawyers who get the phone calls from individuals who have employment concerns, that there probably isn't a attorney among the 75 of us who hasn't gotten calls at times from individuals who have concerns about needing to take time off and their inability to do so and the impact that that would have with respect to their employment here in Maine. Some years ago, the legislature passed a beneficial bill, the Maine Family Medical Leave Requirements Act, which I think most of the members of the committee, if not all of you, would be familiar with. But unfortunately, when people call and say, well, don't we have this family leave bill? As attorneys, we have to tell them that although there is family leave, it's not paid. and so they're unable to access the benefits of that bill. I also am a volunteer with the Southern Maine Worker Center hotline, which is a free hotline that is used by individuals who have labor and employment issues. And basically, the individuals who access that hotline typically are indigent and cannot afford legal services. And many of them call, where I've talked to a number of people over the last 3 years with similar issues. Finally, that I am a parent of a 30-year-old now with autism. And the challenges that that has brought for my wife and me and others who we know who are in similar situations in terms of ability to work and need for time off because of problems associated with caring for individuals with developmental disabilities really is important. It calls out why this bill is needed. As I think Jeff McCade said before me, we're privileged and I have ability to do so, but so many other workers don't. The last point that I want to make is just, and I know Senator Carney has stressed this in the past, but the importance of making Maine an attractive place for individuals to raise their family. Paid family leave is now the norm in most of New England. We have similar bills in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. Vermont and New Hampshire have been considering similar bills. The failure to pass legislation like that would be considered by the commission is going to make Maine an unattractive place for workers and put us at a competitive disadvantage.
And Mr. Young, I'm afraid that is the end of your time, and I'm sure folks will have questions about the other New England states.
Thank you. I'll just wrap up and say thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions. But again, this is a growing trend, not just in New England, but since 2019, when I last testified, another 3 states have passed paid family leave. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Drinkwater has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Young, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
You've mentioned some other New England states. Are they all paid leave, or do you know?
Yes, they all provide for paid leave. And in the paper that I mentioned, there are different constructs, Representative, for how that has worked. Rhode Island has had a longstanding disability insurance program that dates back to the 70s. How they're financed, I think, is really often the key issue. And in my paper and the footnotes there, I've indicated that, but they're all paid family leave, yes.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman Sylvester.
Thank you, Mr. Young, for your testimony today. I've been waiting for someone to kind of talk about the federal program and some of the other states, and I saw you on the list, so I was hoping that you would go there. So the federal program, as I understand it, will be run through Social Security should it be implemented in its present form and be sort of a baseline. But my understanding is that what states implement can go above that, and that the federal government is sort of encouraging the kind of programs that we see in Washington or Oregon or Massachusetts. Did you have any more you wanted to say about that?
Yeah, just simply this. I mean, ideally, there would be a federal program passed, and I agree that states could go above that. But I think there's bills in front of the Congress right now, but there's no certainty that the Jobs Act is going to pass. And I think that's another reason why we need to work on the state level to pass these kinds of bills, is that there's uncertainty about what will happen at the federal level. So thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Pebworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Young, for being here again today. And I really appreciate you and previous testifiers giving personal experience, because I think this has been brought up around this commission in particular, having members that don't just represent organizations that represent people, but bringing that personal experience in is really important. I would like to ask our analysts to have a comparison of the other states that have this currently. And I want to thank you for having the links in your testimony. That's really helpful. And somehow I need to end this in a question. So I will say it's very helpful, don't you think?
I hope my testimony and the links are helpful. I would say that the best source that I have found, Representative Pebworth, and I think it's in my paper, but if not, I'm sure the analysts can find it, is A Better Balance. And they have a chart that shows, what each of the 9 different states in the District of Columbia that have enacted paid family medical leave legislation, how it works in each one of those states, how it's funded, eligibility factors. It's an excellent resource, and I commend it to the committee.
And it is there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Mr. Young from the committee? Seeing none. Next up, Joy Engel. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Joy Engel. I live in Cape Elizabeth, and I'm here to testify in strong support of LD 1559. I am a native Mainer, and I am so proud that my husband, although apologies, he is from Massachusetts, and I are raising the next generation of Mainers, our 4-year-old son and our 8-month-old daughter. And the birth of our daughter has been just a truly shining light in a year that has been the most difficult and challenging year of my life. When the pandemic hit, I was in the early stages of my pregnancy carrying twins. My husband, a family doctor, made the difficult decision to move out of our home for 3 months as we were scared of what his exposure to sick patients would mean to my pregnancy and to our young son. Soon after my husband moved out, we unfortunately lost one of the fetuses I was carrying. Our son's beloved preschool closed, and I was diagnosed with hyperemesis, an extreme form of morning sickness that required me to receive frequent IV fluids because I could not consume food. I was also working a full-time job at the time. My employer, an out-of-state consulting firm that employs just 5 people, has a very generous family and medical leave policy. They worked with me to reduce my weekly hours, so I was able to take care of myself and my son without reducing my pay. They offered me unlimited sick days, so I was able to take the time I needed to take care of my pregnancy. And when I delivered our daughter in September, they offered me 4 months of paid leave to bond with my baby and honestly to recover from a truly traumatic pregnancy. I cannot fathom what our family would have done if my employer was less generous or understanding. But I imagine that, like so many other women in Maine and across the nation, I would have been forced to leave the workforce. As I look back on that time, I'm eternally grateful that my company was able to give me the time I needed to take care of my family, the effects of which extend beyond my children and my husband, but to our community as well. When women have been forced out of the workforce in droves as a result of the pandemic, Maine now has an opportunity to actually enact a policy that will help bring them back. I thank you for your time, and sorry that I broke down a little bit, and I urge you to please support this legislation.
Thank you for your testimony here today and sharing your experience with us. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Julie Shermer. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I apologize if not. The floor is yours.
It is correct. Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and other esteemed members of the committee. I am Julie Shermer. I'm a Falmouth resident. I'm a clinical social worker, and I represent NASW Maine, urging you to support this important piece of legislation. Today, my focus is on caregiving needs of those of us with disabled adults, children, and elderly, and the undue burden it has on women. My written testimony really is focusing on the numbers. So today I'm going to tell you about my lifelong friend, Nancy, and good friend, Bob. So Nancy had to manage multiple caregiving needs and phases, taking on everly increasing demanding jobs to help support her two kids who were in college and her husband who, gosh, I didn't think I was going to get emotional, who had early Alzheimer's and his slow cognitive, emotional, and physical deterioration. So much was not paid for in terms of dealing with his multiple phases. The only thing that was paid for was the nursing home, which fired him after 2 to 3 months because of his aggressive behavior, his eloping, I love that term. He would elope by walking out of the facility, this locked facility, because he looked just like any of us. He was in his 50s. And he also was climbing the nursing home garden walls to escape. He couldn't understand why he was there and why he couldn't be with his wife and family. So besides the financial fragility that Nancy and her family was facing, I was really worried about Nancy's physical and emotional health. She's one of many, many women who I've seen in my career as a counselor, and many of the millions of women who have to support disabled spouses, children, and elderly. And so this is why NASW Maine and I strongly urge you to vote yes on this important bill that will really give Maine a strategic paid family medical leave for our communities. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony today and for being here. Chairman Sylvester has a question for you.
Thank you, Ms. Chairman, for being here. I appreciate you sharing your good friend's story, and I wondered if there was anything in particular in your testimony as I looked through it that you wanted to highlight for us.
Well, I think the caregiving population, the money, it's for the US, $450 billion per year, and it's usually, this caregiving stuff is usually uncompensated. And I think the fact that women who drop out are dropping out of the workforce early, there's a huge discrepancy between who's unemployed right now after COVID, but just generally, women who drop out of the workforce early providing care lose an average of $324,000 in lifetime earnings. Now, this is not right. The wage discrepancy overall is not right between men and women. So those would be the two things. So thank you for asking.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Are there any other questions for Julie Shermer today? Seeing none, thank you for being here and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
We will now hear from Cara Kakini. I will probably not say that correctly, followed by Kathy Kilrain DeRio, Kimberly Simmons, and Megan Lasala.
Hi there. Hello, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Cara Kaikini. You did great. And I live in Freeport. I'm here today to speak in support of LD 1559 as a lactation consultant and as the board president of the Maine State Breastfeeding Coalition. Breastfeeding Coalition supports this bill because paid family leave has been shown to correlate with a significant increase in breastfeeding rates, and it significantly decreases the risk of postpartum depression. Feeding breast milk exclusively for the first 6 months of life is recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics based on a lot of literature and research showing the benefits, the health benefits for both mom and baby. In Maine, there's a 24% decrease in breastfeeding between birth and 8 weeks of life. Over 16% of mothers said they stopped breastfeeding because of returning to work. And mothers who have a lack of maternity leave are less likely to even start breastfeeding due to workplace barriers to expressing and collecting their milk. Returning to work after having a baby is a physically and emotionally trying time. Birthing mothers' bodies are recovering from delivery. Their sleep patterns are very much altered, and they feel exhausted, sore, inadequate, and stressed. For breastfeeding mothers in particular, they may be having painful challenges themselves, or their babies may be struggling to gain weight or to take a bottle. Mothers often blame themselves when breastfeeding doesn't work out, despite the fact they're doing everything they can to meet their goals. I urge you to support the financial, mental, and physical health of new parents and their babies by voting for the kind of systemic support that LD 1559 would bring. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions? Seeing none. Thank you for being here. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Next is Kathy Corrain-Del, followed by Kimberly Simmons, Megan LaSala, and Pat Pinto. And I don't see, there she is. Good morning.
Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and members of the Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Kathy Corrain-Del Rio. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Director of Campaigns and Healthcare Advocacy for Maine Equal Justice, a nonprofit legal aid provider working with people with low income to increase economic security, opportunity, and equity for people in Maine. Today, I'm supporting LD 1559. While paid family and medical leave is needed policy for all workers, it's particularly needed for low-income workers who often face impossible choices when trying to balance work and family. Lower wage workers have less access to any form of leave, paid or unpaid, since they are more often employed in jobs with part-time or uncertain work schedules, have shorter job tenures, and typically work for smaller businesses that may not even meet the threshold for unpaid leave under FMLA. At Maine Equal Justice, we have received calls seeking legal assistance or help from many of these families over the years. Already struggling to make ends meet, they face even deeper poverty as the price for caring for a sick child or other family member. With COVID, we received even more calls from people who had been forced to quarantine due to exposure or a positive test. Without alternatives, many lose their jobs or have to go to work even if they are sick and know they should not. Whether they lose their job or have to take leave without pay, many have no choice but to turn to public assistance to make ends meet. Access to paid family and medical leave can reduce these taxpayer-funded costs. Researchers from Rutgers University found that when paid family and medical leave is available, it reduces the number of women who rely on public assistance. Moreover, an implementation study of California's paid family leave policy found increased job retention among workers holding lower wage jobs who use the state's paid leave system. The commission to develop a paid family and medical leave benefits program that would be created by this bill is an important step to making paid family and medical leave a system that works for everyone in Maine. It's also important that this commission will bring together stakeholders, legislators, and people from the governor's office in order to help make sure that everyone has critical input in the resulting study and plan. And just to share quickly a little of my own story, which some of you heard when I testified 2 years ago, I spent 5 weeks with my son in the hospital when he was born prematurely. While I had paid leave, many families around me couldn't be in the NICU with their babies because they didn't have paid leave. I can't even imagine working while your heart is lying in an incubator. Then 2 years later, my father, who was our family's rock, was suddenly diagnosed with metastasized pancreatic cancer. He died less than a week later, but thankfully I was able to be at his side. And I was also able to help provide some of the 24-hour a day care my mom needs during that time as well, because until the day he was hospitalized, my dad was her caregiver. Thanks to paid leave, I was able to take the time needed to grieve with my family and figure out arrangements needed to provide her care and keep her out of a nursing home. You'd think I've testified a couple of times on this that I would be able to get through it, but I can't. In my family alone, my sister once needed leave, which she took unpaid, causing financial hardship because she was hit by a drunk driver. My dad needed leave when my mom had an unexpected series of strokes in her 40s. And we needed leave when my grandmother clung to life after experiencing a stroke when my grandfather, her husband of 66 years, passed away from a heart attack. The reality is that workers are human beings. At some point in our lives, we all experience the birth or adoption of a child, the death of a family member, disease, surgery, strokes or heart attacks, accidents, or other catastrophes because we are human. No matter your income, type of job, or employer, all workers should be able to access paid leave when needed. For all the families in our state, I urge you to pass LD 1559 so that we can begin the process of creating a paid leave system for Maine. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for being here, for your testimony and sharing your vulnerability with us. It is perfectly fine and welcome. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, have a great weekend. Next up is Kimberly Simmons, followed by Megan LaSala, Pat Pinto, and Rita Furlow to follow. Welcome. Good morning.
Good
Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and esteemed members of the committee. My name is Dr. Kimberly Simmons, a sociologist from Portland, Maine. This morning, I had an argument with my husband about why I was volunteering time advocating for LD 1559 and he wasn't. He said it was my chosen work, but I reject that. The importance of paid leave for our collective health and well-being has been well documented for decades. We all wish to be working on more innovative, creative research and policy, but we are stuck here. No meaningful update to our FMLA system has occurred since the 1990s. I told my husband that the political is personal. He took 2 weeks off when our first baby was born, and that seemed like a lot of time to his employer, but I was far from ready to be left alone with an infant. My midwife reminded me that few of the mothers she worked with had 2 weeks off, never mind the fathers. Many parents return to paid work within days of childbirth, but this is a cruel, unhealthy, unsafe reality. Time to care is a basic human right and shared responsibility. Providing care is core to our humanity and is an experience we all deserve. But labors of love are not meant to break us. That infant from my memory is now a college graduate with a degree in computer science. She is the young person Maine claims to want, but she is moving to a state that does offer paid leave. I worry she won't feel she can have children at all, and I can't imagine her returning to Maine if we don't change. If the choice remains work or family, we all suffer. We need a new framework, and LD 1559 will allow us to build it. As my children begin to need less, my parents will likely need more. They have contributed to Maine for decades, but there is little support for elders outside of family care. I love them, but my father will tell you I am not the best nurse. Nevertheless, I am better than no one. I have taught for the University of Maine system for more than 20 years. My choice to be available for caregiving allows the state to pay me pennies on the tenured dollar. I have no benefits, no job security, no paid leave myself. The framework of individual choice obscures the set of better choices we actually all wish for that could be available to us, as it is in other states and countries. Let's shift and address our political choices. It is a social policy choice to exploit the unpaid and low-wage labor of women rather than acknowledge care as core to public life. It is a political choice to emphasize the barriers to implementing paid leave over the benefits. I ask the committee instead to champion LD 1559. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony today. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you and have a great weekend. Next up is Megan LaSala, followed by Pat Pinto, Rita Furlow, James Mayall, and Adam Good. Welcome, Megan LaSala. And before you begin your testimony this morning, I would ask you to, we don't usually allow comments in the chat. I did see your comment. I don't want to ignore it. So before you begin your testimony, I will give you leave to address the committee on that issue first.
Oh, thank you. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that you don't usually allow comments in the chat. I was just offering some gentle feedback about using gendered language when not acknowledging constituents. We have several members that have been misgendered during this legislative testimony while trying to give testimony about very personal experiences, and that's a painful experience. So just offering that not calling people sir or miss is a simple way to show respect for transgender and non-binary constituents. And thank you for the opportunity to share that feedback.
You're welcome. And you know, it is maybe not a known rule. It's actually in the joint rule that we are to address people by a title. I don't know if everyone knows that, and so we do our best. I know it could be intimidating to be in front of a legislative committee and be called wrongly, but I do encourage you to present that feedback back and say, we can be corrected. And so if people want to tell us how they'd like to be addressed, that's perfectly fine as well. So with that, please present your testimony on LD 1559.
Well, thank you so much. Good morning. Thank you, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and distinguished members of the Labor and Housing Committee. I really appreciate the opportunity to testify this morning. My name is Megan LaSala. I use she and her pronouns. I'm a resident of Portland, and I'm the interim executive director of the Southern Maine Worker Center, and I'm here to testify in favor of LD 1559. I'm here to speak to the need for a commission to hear directly from low-wage workers in the shaping of Maine's future paid family leave policy. The Southern Maine Worker Center is a member-led organization working to improve the lives and working conditions of poor and working class people in Maine. Our members need this policy for all the reasons you've already heard outlined today. And we need it to be universal, excluding absolutely no workers. We need it to have strong job protection measures, and we need it to have an inclusive definition of family. In 2019, I became the primary caretaker and medical proxy for my dear friend Mark while he was living with terminal cancer and AIDS-related illness. Nurses and doctors would often ask about our relationship, assuming I must be a daughter or a sister or a blood relative of some kind. We came up with various quips to explain that we were none of these things, but we were still family. We said, "I love you" daily. I was there by his side while he moved through the experience of living in a dying body, advocating, witnessing, and doing the labor of caretaking. I held his hand while he took his final breaths. Families are what we make them, and LGBTQ people in particular need policies to recognize our familial bonds. While taking care of Mark, I was lucky to have an employer that allowed me to take unpaid and flex time without firing me, but keeping up with bills during that time was a struggle. The establishment of this commission will assure these kinds of stories are heard in the shaping of policy to assure that we have an equitable policy that truly leaves no one behind. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony and sharing your experience with us. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here again and have a great weekend. And it was my error to not say up front about the chat, but it's not that deep. So again, I appreciate a little bit of education coming our way. Have a great weekend. Next up is Pat Pinto. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Greetings, Chair Senator Hickman and Representative Sylvester and members of the Joint Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Pat Pinto, and I am the Volunteer State President for AARP Maine. Thank you for the opportunity to share testimony with you today. I'm going to keep my remarks as very brief. I am testifying in support of LD 1559. ARP Maine is fighting to improve paid family leave policies for workers in Maine, especially our family caregivers who help their older loved ones remain in their homes. Across Maine, there are approximately 181,000 family caregivers who provide critical assistance to older Mainers. Many do this while juggling full or part-time jobs. Unpaid family caregivers contribute more than 152 million hours of unpaid care each year, valued at about $2.2 billion. So they are the backbone of the care system in Maine. Staying home when a loved one is sick shouldn't mean losing your pay or even your job. Caring for a loved one can be expensive, stressful, and isolating. We must utilize every tool available to ensure workers in Maine, including family caregivers, have access to paid family leave. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. And again, I urge you to support the committee to support LD 1559.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, it's good to see you here today and have a great weekend. Next up is Rita Furlow. Welcome.
Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, members of the Committee on Labor and Housing. It's a pleasure to join you today. My name is Rita Furlow. I'm the Senior Policy Analyst from the Maine Children's Alliance. And we're here to testify in favor of LD 1559. Maine children now will grow up to be future parents, workers, and leaders of our communities. And with the right resources and opportunities, we can ensure that those children will have a strong start in life. We know from research, particularly brain research, for example, at the Harvard Center for the Developing Child, that for children to really grow and succeed and for brain development, that the most important piece is the relationship that they have with caregivers. The relationship they have with parents literally builds their brains, builds the synapses. It's critical for children to progress and be healthy and strong and successful. So we know that that those relationships are critical, and it may seem simple, but it really is so important. And those children require the care and consistency, and most importantly, it requires time. So we urge you to seriously think about that time as an investment in our children and in our state. And you've heard already about the importance of breastfeeding and the fact that women who successfully breastfeed are more likely to have higher rates of immunizations and more likely to participate in child checks. Those are all really critical, again, to children succeeding. So we hope that by passing this, you can really create an environment in our state that supports and attracts workers and families. As you've already heard many times, we are the oldest state, and we need policies to really attract new families and encourage existing parents to stay in Maine. So we strongly urge you to support this legislation. So thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, have a great weekend.
Thank you.
I will invite Mr. James Mile to provide testimony today. Welcome, sir.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, members of the committee. My name is James Mile. I'm a policy analyst at the Maine Center for Economic Policy, and I'm here today to testify in support of LD 1559. Today, too many Mainers face a steep loss in income when they're presented with life's unpredictable but inevitable occurrences such as births, illness, injury, and bereavement. All of us experience these moments in our lives, but only some of us have the financial security required to deal with them. Paid family medical leave will give all working Mainers peace of mind and ensure that no one has to choose between a paycheck and their health, or their own health, or that of their family members. I know you've heard a lot of different ways in which this testimony would benefit individuals and us as a community. I'm going to focus a little bit on some of the economic benefits. Americans are estimated to suffer nearly $21 billion in lost wages because they lack access to paid family and medical leave programs. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. In addition to lost wages, the economy suffers through increased rates of dropout from the labor force, especially by women. Paid family and medical leave is one of the most effective policies to improve labor force participation by women. When women are able to fully take part in the economy, our economy grows faster and women have more financial independence. International researchers cite the lack of access to paid leave as the primary reason why labor force participation is so low among American women compared to our peer countries. Studies show that paid family and medical leave programs allow women worldwide, as well as in places like New Jersey, California, and Rhode Island, to remain more attached to the workforce. Paid family and medical leave will also help to narrow unfair wage disparities between men and women in our state. Maine women, like women across this country, earn less than their male peers doing similar jobs. The median wage for Maine women who work full-time year-round is around 83% of what men make. Their penalty is even larger for full-time working mothers who earn 74% of what full-time working fathers make. A robust paid family medical leave can help close this gap, both by raising long-term wages for mothers and by encouraging fathers like myself to take leave. Paid family and medical leave shouldn't be a problem for business. Research shows that existing programs decrease employee turnover without increasing total wage cost. Surveys of businesses in states with existing paid family and medical leave programs also show small impacts on employers and general satisfaction with the laws. In my testimony, I've included a few examples of these. For example, in Rhode Island, most employers, including small employers, said they supported the law. In New Jersey, employers did not report any abuse of their system. Employers mostly respond to employees out on leave by assigning their work to others, meaning they don't have the extra cost of hiring a replacement. In California, 91% of the businesses, including small businesses surveyed, reported no decrease in profitability. And the Society for Human Resource Management noticed in a report about that had been in a report about California's laws, that their fears had been unfounded, noting that, quote, more than 5 years later, employers' concerns have so far not been realized. Paid family medical leave is a common sense way to address economic stability and quality of life while improving our economy. That's why it's been adopted in 9 states and 183 countries around the world. Bringing this common sense policy to our state would help working Mainers meet their commitments to their employer and to their families. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony today. Are there any questions for Mr. Mile from the committee? Seeing none, that's all I have signed up to testify. Oh, Representative Pemberth has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is about this being a commission. I think people are really talking about it as though it is a done deal to develop it. And I wonder if there are other aspects of this commission that you think might come forth.
Could you, I'm not quite sure what the question is, I guess. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. The bill before us is a commission to develop a paid family medical leave benefits program. And I think we've been talking about, or I've been thinking about it in a specific direction. And I just wondered, I was happy to hear about survey information of other states who have implemented this and the results of the implementation thus far. And I guess my question is this a very specific route that we would be exploring with this commission, in your opinion, or are there other sort of edge areas to be considering at this time as well? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I think the way that the language in the bill is structured so far, there's a lot of flexibility for the commission to sort of examine sort of different structures within the program. I mean, I think a lot of the states that have adopted it so far, and indeed sort of most of the international models have a lot of things in common. And I think the commission would probably want to mirror a lot of those things and sort of ensuring that a lot of folks have access to the program and that there's an adequate amount of leave available. But there would be a lot of questions that I think you would be able to explore, including sort of how it would be funded, how many weeks people would be eligible for, the wage replacement rate, that sort of thing. So I think one of the advantages of the commission is it would be able to sort of look at those different components and figure out what's sort of best for Mainers and for the economy in Maine and more broadly.
Thank you.
Chairman Sylvester has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things that Washington discovered was just how important it was to make the program accessible, and a lot of the studies that they did were how long could someone go without pay before the benefit was actually in their hands, and those sorts of things. Are there other types of studies like that you think we might consider in this commission, particularly in terms of small employers and as well as folks like farmers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it feels like there's kind of like two different questions in there. I mean, I think making sure that, and you've heard this a little bit already from folks, but it is really important to make sure that whatever programming in place gives people enough income security while they're on leave that they can afford to take it. Otherwise, it's a program that really only benefits sort of high earners or people who already have savings. So I think that's really important. That's something they found in California, that they had a long-standing program and they made several tweaks to it, including sort of increasing the wage replacement rate that really helped lower income workers to be able to afford to take it. And I think it is really important also, and I think Maine is a good example of this, of making sure that we can reach sort of thinking beyond sort of the traditional just payroll employees who could be helped by this, and designing a program that I think could reach self-employed folks, including a lot of the farmers and natural resource economy people who work in our state, because I think that would be really transformative for those folks. And I think there are a few states that have looked at that. I think the other thing that the Washington example points to that I think is really important in the way the commission may function is being able to pull together the expertise from different state agencies and design a program sort of with those in mind. So I think housing it in a place within state government, I think the bill currently envisages it working with the Office of Innovation in the future. That sort of thing would help to pull in different bits of expertise from different departments, which I think could really benefit us as well.
Thank you.
Representative Geer has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for being here, Mr. Mile. My question has to do with just trying to see if there's a connection. I'm curious in your work if you see this between what we see as the low usage of unemployment insurance by those who are eligible, and departures from the workforce that are kind of fueling the need for this program. I'm just curious as to your perspective on that.
I mean, I think there's certainly a connection in, and I think as Representative McDonald said, you know, there's a big difference between sort of the unemployment insurance program, especially sort of as it functioned pre-pandemic, in that, you know, that's really designed for people who you know, lose their jobs through no fault of their own, and, you know, who are laid off. And it's not, it really doesn't cover folks who have sort of a medical situation. So there are a lot of people who, you know, have to either quit their job, and this is very common for like young parents, end up having to quit their jobs to be able to look after their kids because they can't afford to juggle those. But also, you know, folks who might have to take a temporary illness can't use unemployment insurance to cover that. So I think, you know, this program really does fill in a gap that helps, you know, that helps address that way in which unemployment insurance can't help people.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, that's all I have signed up to testify in favor, unless Nicole Clegg, I see in the waiting room. Are you here to testify on this bill?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful. I will. You may turn on your video and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Nicole Clegg, and I serve as the Senior Vice President of Public Affairs for Planned Parenthood of Northern New England. And I am pleased to submit testimony in support of LD 1559 to you, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and the members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. I appreciate that you've heard very compelling testimony from many of my colleagues, so I will do my best to be brief and not repeat information that you've already heard. You know, at Planned Parenthood of Northern New England, we see a high number of patients who are struggling financially, many of whom are living at or below the 200% of the federal poverty level, and 86% of our patients are women. We maintain a deep commitment to seeing all regardless of ability to pay, and because of that have a unique experience of hearing from our patients just the struggles that they experience every day in being able to take care of their health and the health of their families. And it's for that reason that we support policies like paid family medical leave, because we know that it can make an incredible difference for our patients' lives in helping them attain economic security. I think you've heard from many others about the disproportionate impact that the lack of paid family medical leave has on women and people of color and those that make up the majority of our frontline workers. So I won't repeat that information, but just simply share that we are aligned with our colleagues who shared those points. And, you know, finally, I would just share that at Planned Parenthood, we care deeply about making sure that all people have the flexibility and the ability to make decisions that are best for themselves, their health, and the care of their family. And that's why we encourage you to support LD 1559. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony and for being here today. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none. And seeing no testimony in opposition to the bill, I will now move to take testimony from those testifying neither for nor against: Curtis Picard, Gregory Dougal, and Peter Gore. Good morning.
Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and members of the Labor Housing Committee. I am Curtis Picard, President and CEO of the Retail Association of Maine, and I am testifying neither for nor against LD 1559. I won't read my written testimony, which I did submit. We are very glad that 1559 does talk about doing an actuarial study. We think that's imperative for the establishment of any insurance program, which is truly what a paid family leave program would be. We are a little concerned that the resolve is fairly prescriptive to create a program, regardless of what the actuarial study shows. Instead, I offered in my written testimony that the committee take a look at LD 1587 from the 128 session, which was also sponsored by Senator Daughtry. LD 1587 detailed a number of scenarios that we think will be helpful in crafting a useful actuarial study. So I won't go through those. Those are in my written testimony. And then I'll just want to share an example because I know Representative Pebworth and other members of the committee are appreciating personal examples. And we are a small employer. We are currently exempt from the 15-person employee plus requirement of Maine's law. However, as a father and employer who feels like my coworkers are my extended family, I strongly support family-friendly workplaces and do whatever I can to accommodate the needs that arise. When one of our employees welcomed a new baby to their family, we provided up to 10 weeks of unpaid leave, even though we were not required to. But the reality was we lost a significant percentage of our workforce for almost 3 months. It would be different if it was one employee out of 100, but this was one employee out of 3, and it was not somebody who was easily replaceable by a temporary worker. But we pulled it together. We relied on our existing staff to get the job done, but it certainly was a challenge. And I offer that example because it's important to not only examine the benefits for the employee taking the leave, but also for the impact on the employer having to deal with an extended absence. So I'll stop there. We think this is a worthy discussion. We're happy to provide input where we can. I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Picard. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Gregory Dougal, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvesters, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Greg Dougal, and I am submitting testimony today representing Hospitality Maine, neither for nor against LD 1559. We have supported the idea of studying paid FMLA in the past when bills were put forth to create the benefit and amended to be something similar to what this bill sort of starts out to be. So we applaud this effort, but with some reservations. This resolve, however, is little different as it seems to create the program before completing the study to see if it's viable. Prior testimonies that we have given and based on what we've heard today, most of these bills that were put forth or the compromises that ensued after were employee-driven programs, not employer-driven programs. So I just want to make that point up front. The state of Maine, in that vein, will not be able to have a program on their own, as was discussed in prior bills, because there will be sporadic participation based on the employee contribution aspect of the prior bills. And because of that, there is no idea to know how much money will find itself into the coffers of the program to pay for benefits. I know at some point there was a discussion of Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont doing it together. Again, this would be if they were employee-based. Prior discussions were based on the additional participation of these 1 or 2 other states. We believe the study needs to be conducted to determine the feasibility of the program prior to the discussion of implementation to see if the critical mass to be successful is there. To that end, these words in this proposed legislation give us pause. Develop a plan to implement a paid family and medical leave benefits. Won't read the whole thing, you know what it says. But it basically ascertains that we should just develop and not even look at any of the data that it seems that we've received. Also, as we've heard earlier, that there is movement at the federal level to create a program to the U.S. Congress supported by the Biden administration. Whatever the feds do should be carefully scrutinized and potentially deferred to because the federal government has the fiscal capability to operate a program of this size over all 50 states and potentially absorb some of the tremendous risk that will go with a similar program. Actuarial information is critical to the success of this program at any level. Thank you for your consideration. And remember that small businesses and state government are just getting used to the nuances of the earned paid leave statute. So our humble request is that you tread lightly and do the appropriate research to real answers to the many questions. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you, Mr. Dougal. Representative Drinkwater has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. Dougal. Nice to see you here. I'm looking up at the makeup of this proposed commission. I don't see anywhere on here where it would mention, people from your background. Have you served on these type of commissions before?
Well, not official commissions as this one has been, set up, but certainly on stakeholder groups, many stakeholder groups as it relates. It doesn't seem as though there is a place for me or us, I guess, on this commission. And I think that Representative Sylvester alluded to that earlier when he said that it's great that there are people. And I don't disagree with that, but it would be nice if some of the trade associations were at least represented on this commission.
Do you have a follow-up? Okay, great. Any other questions for Mr. Dougal? Mr. Dougal, do you have opposition to having the employers that you represent be actually on the commission instead of the representative of those employers?
I have no problem with the makeup of what you have as the commission. It would be nice if somebody in a capacity that represents multiple. It doesn't have to be the Hospitality Maine Group. It could be Maine Chamber. It could be another chamber. But I mean, I think you do get a different perspective when you have somebody that represents multiples of people versus just somebody giving their perspective, though that's important as well.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, have a great weekend.
Same to you, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Gore, the floor is yours.
Good Friday morning, Senator Hickman and Representative Sylvester and members of the Labor Committee. I'm Peter Gore, the Executive Vice President of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, and I'm just here to provide you with a few thoughts. Actually, Representative Sylvester's assistant this morning, who just joined him, gave me a good smile. I got to seeing his dog come into the room. Dogs are very popular on Zoom right now. At any rate, this issue has been discussed before in a number of different legislative sessions and settings, and I have discussed this with Senator Daughtry. I was about to say Representative, she did serve in the other body, and we think it is time that this issue was looked at. We share some of the concerns that both Mr. Picard and Mr. Dougal just laid out. I think what's most important is that this bill does undertake an actuarial review, because the uptake and the finances and the financing of this will be critical for its success. And in other states that have this already in place have had the benefit of other insurance type systems to springboard off of this program, particularly workplace disability insurance systems. There are a couple of specific fleshing out that we might suggest you take a look at. In section 2 under 4A, you might want to better clarify what it means by expertise in the issues related to family medical leave. Do you mean legal expertise, for example, or another type of expertise? In section 5 under number 2, you might want to consider, when you're looking at the various impacts, adding the impact of absenteeism on small businesses. And finally, we do share the concerns that this is a predetermined outcome. We prefer to see the legislature approach this as a feasibility study for this program. And again, the issues that Mr. Dougal just brought up around having the benefit of an employer representative that represents multiple types of businesses, we think would be helpful as well. The Maine State Chamber is prepared to assist this commission in any way, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide you with our comments this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gore. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, have a great weekend, sir.
You all have a great weekend too.
And I wonder if there are any attendees left who would like to testify on this bill. I don't see any new names. I could be wrong. I'll speak now if you are there. Well, that completes the public hearing and the testimony on LD 1559. So I will close the public hearing. It is 11:22. We are scheduled to return at noon for work sessions that will go on for a bit. We will not take up LD 1312 this afternoon. The bill sponsor would like to be here for that work session, and so we will move that to Monday. Ms. Thompson, if she sent us the link for the work session. And so I will ask members who may want to caucus in the 40 minutes that we have until noon to sign into the link for the work session, and then we can go into breakout rooms, and then that way we don't have to have more than one link going on this afternoon. So with that, we will end this particular webinar and open the work session webinar, and we'll take a break for lunch. Our caucus, we could probably meet in 15 minutes or so just to give people a chance to stretch and then come back with your lunch, and we can look at the bills that we're going to vote on this afternoon. So with that, see you soon.